Okay, we're going to look at stopping Israel's destructions. Destruction because, as I heard on TV the last 2 weeks, the 150,000 missiles are aimed at Israel, and once you know that as a fact, and 50,000 trained troops, 50,000, that's a lot of trained troops, are in Lebanon, they're in Syria, they're in Gaza, they're dotted around Israel, ready to strike when Iran gives the signal. Iran's been funding all of this. And, sadly, America flew a whole bunch of cash and landed it for Iran, and they've been spending the money on, preparing a great battle against Israel. And so if you put it into a computer and you ran the computer program forward, the computer would say Israel gets destroyed by 150,000 rockets, missiles, and 50,000 troops. It's just a matter of when it happens. Only God says, oh, wait, you forgot to add in me. I'm not going to let that happen. So most of the nations surrounding Israel want to push the Jews of Israel into the sea, totally destroy Israel. In fact, years ago, the Iranian leader guy stood up in the United Nations and said he wanted to push Israel into the sea, which you would think would be a dumb thing to tell all nations, but they don't care. They are hell-bent on getting this done someday in the future. Recently, it was reported on national TV that Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas have 150,000 rockets. And I had to write the number down. If you say 1,000 rockets, say, boy, that's a lot of rockets. If you say 100,000 rockets, you say, wait a minute, boy, that's, wow, 150,000 rockets is an immense amount of military hardware, ready to fire at Israel. These rockets are improved with guidance systems. A lot of the rockets you've heard of and seen of in the past, they're like bottle rockets. Most of you have fired off a bottle rocket. You light the wick, it's sitting in the bottle, you stand back, and it goes, and you've got no idea whether it's going to go that way or that way or that way or that way or that way. It has no guidance system. These new rockets are built with guidance systems. So it would come as no surprise to most people that this would be the destruction of Israel. Right? Jesus has told us 2,000 years ago that Israel doesn't end in an onslaught of missiles. Right? Because that, Matthew, we'll see in Luke 21, it doesn't happen by, a raining of terror and explosion from the sky, and then everybody is dead. So here's how Jesus describes the final moments of nation Israel, Luke 21:20. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. So if you're in Jerusalem and you're seeing armies, peacekeeping armies, setting up camp, it's like, that's a really good time to flee to the mountains. Okay, days or weeks later, you see the morning and evening sacrifices are stopped, and the abominable desolation person sits in the holy place showing himself that he is God, and Jesus tells us that is the precise time when you begin fleeing immediately. You don't go into your house to get anything from your house. You don't get your cloak from across the other side of the field where you've been working. The window of time is so narrow now, you have to leave the city, right, in order to save yourself by living in the mountains for the next 3.5 years. Then they will see the Son of Man coming with power and great glory. So it's the time ahead of this coming tribulation period, and then eventually Jesus comes back. Daniel tells that Israel is destroyed by a leader with a small number of people. Daniel 11:21. In his place a vile person shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue, trickery, and after a league is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, for he shall come up to power, become strong with a small number of people. Okay, so keep that in your thinking. This leader comes from a situation where he's only got a small number of people. Now, when it comes to military activity, Small has to be in the hundreds of thousands, right? Or, a lot of people. It has to be close to a couple of million. If you don't have a couple of million people, you can't put together an army worth of anything, right? So Daniel 11:23, after the league is made, when he becomes strong with a small number of people. Now, the rockets that are pointed at Israel are from the Islamic nations. And there's 2 billion Islamic people. So you can't say out of 7.7 billion people on the planet that 2 billion people is a small number of people. That's a huge number of people, right? So a billion is 1,000 million. It's like, and then you get to a trillion, which is, a trillion is 1,000 billion. And then I get all fuzzy. It's like, that's a lot of money, And how many $1 trillion are we in debt right now? 22 $22 trillion. So that's, anybody got a little extra dollars? Anyone want to contribute to paying off the debt? $22 trillion. Anyhow, small number of people, leader, is the beast king of Revelation, who gets his power from Satan the devil. Now, if you had a war started somewhere and one side was given power from Satan the devil, would you expect that side to win? I mean, Satan has immense power. Right? And if God stands back and says, okay, Satan, I'm going to let you run this one, and I'll be hands off. So you would expect Satan's side to be the winning side of that particular skirmish. So this is the vile beast power king who gathers visible armies, because when you see armies around Jerusalem, near Jerusalem, before the ending of the nation of Israel. So Jesus is given 3 warnings. 1, when you see armies camping around Jerusalem. 2, when the morning and the evening sacrifices are stopped on the same day as the abominable desolator is set up in the holy place. Right? So he's given 3 warnings. 1 is an early warning, and you probably can get out of town by taking stuff out of your house. But the other 2 are not early warning, they're last minute warning, and you need to get going now, immediately. Daniel 11:31, forces shall be mustered by him, they shall defile the sanctuary fortress, read holy place, and then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation, read abominable desolator person. So Israel does not end when 150,000 rocket attack comes. So how do they escape from 150,000 rocket attack? Right? How does Israel survive? And God has given us to the answer to that, and we'll look at it in a minute. Israel is saved from this attack and lives again until the beast power king crushes Israel out of existence in the last 3.5 years before the coming of Christ. Jesus clearly says Israelites will be captured and taken off to prison camps in other nations. So if all 150,000 rockets landed, it would just about kill every living thing in Israel, and there would be no armies. There'd be no, you'd die in battle, I guess, from a missile hitting you, right? But there's no taking prisoners because the missiles killed everybody, right? Luke 21:24, and they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled under feet by the Gentiles. So the world will marvel that Israel survives this attack, which is described in Daniel 11:41, 2 and 3. And so what I'm thinking, we're this side of the missile attack. On the other side of the missile attack, Israel will still be, it'll be reduced, you're going to suffer casualties, right? But Israel will still be alive so that the beast power can destroy it later. You can't destroy Israel twice. Because once you destroy Israel the first time, there is no Israel to destroy. So God is going to save Israel from an Islamic rocket attack so that they can still be a nation when the beast power king sets up in the last 3.5 years, And as he's getting set up, he totally destroys Israel, military Israel, government Israel, people, way of life, sends them off to prison camps. 3.5 years, there is no Israel. And then he puts his feet back on the Mount of Olives and he says, now we're going to have God's people, Israel, in Jerusalem once again. But it's amazing to think that the Israeli nation now won't be there for the last 3.5 years of human rule on planet Earth. So the world will marvel that Israel survived the massive Middle Eastern World War III, which is described in Daniel 11:41, 2 and 3. What stops Israel destruction by rockets? The answer is right there in Daniel 11:41. He shall enter the glorious land, read Israel, and many nations, many countries will be overthrown. So Israel gets protected. Many nations who want the destruction of Israel, they get overthrown, they get captured, they get neutralized. And so they're still an active nation after the many nations are overthrown. Years ago, America entered Kuwait to save it from destruction at the hands of Saddam Hussein. Most of us, it's ancient history for most of us, and the young people, they don't even know that a war existed. But we entered Kuwait not to capture Kuwait, not to destroy Kuwait, but to save Kuwait from being destroyed. And you know, our military drove Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Kuwait is now Kuwait again. Kuwait survived because of the intervention of a superior power. In this future war, the Israel saving king will totally capture and rule Egypt and other nations. And you know, I think it's hard to wrap your mind about how can this be? How can this happen? But verse 43, he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. He's taken ownership of Egypt. He has control over all the riches and the power and the precious things. A lot of precious things in Egypt. A lot of them are archaeological, right? But he has total power over Egypt and other nations, and it's like somebody comes along and just captures nation after nation after nation after nation after nation in the Middle East. That's a war we can't even imagine, but it's there in print, in Scripture, right? So the Bible tells us that Israel is not destroyed during rocket attacks of, now the rocket attacks are most likely to begin World War III, right? And they're ready. You know, if Iran called them up and said, fire those rockets, they'd be in the air while I'm standing here talking, right? But Iran hasn't given the word go yet because they're probably scared stiff of what America might do to them if they fire those rockets. So the Bible is telling us Israel doesn't get destroyed by a massive rocket attack of this coming World War III situation.